Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. It's titled Creating Effective Minutes, I should say, for your board meetings. My name's Sean. I'll be your moderator for the next 45 minutes. First off, thanks for attending today. We really appreciate the effort you've made to be here. We're all living busy lives these days. And during our session, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and not the chat. It just enables us to filter the questions more effectively. And finally, if you stay through till the end of the webinar, which we hope you will do, and as customary for our webinars, we've got a special treat for you. By answering a simple 1-minute question at the, it's a 1-minute survey, not a question. At the end of the webinar, you'll go into a draw to win our beautiful gift hamper worth $400. Now, let me just share my screen. Tell me when you can see that, Jen.
Yes, sure can.
Fabulous. Now, this is a little plug for Board Pro. So for those that don't know Board Pro, we are a board software provider, sometimes called a board portal, and we serve around about 20,000 users around the world. We enable organizations to prepare for and run their board meetings really effectively with clever software, with less time, and we deliver more impact and value for the organization. And as much as we are a board software provider or portal, part of our wider mission, certainly from a marketing point of view, is to make the fundamentals of governance free and easy to implement for all organizations, especially those with constraints. Now, let me introduce our fantastic panel for today and the webinar, starting with Jen Butler of Absolute Gen. Jen is a professional board secretary in both the public and private sectors, working across a number of industries, business types, and organizations of all sizes. Jen brings a fresh and collaborative approach to governance organizations, planning and administration. Kia ora to you, Jen.
Kia ora koutou.
Secondly, we have Sonia Byers, a director of Governance by Design, a leading consultancy and advisory firm guiding boards to evaluate governance, processes, and legal frameworks in their organization. We redefine the director-board relationship and foster leadership from the boardroom. Sonia develops bespoke governance solutions and has built a reputation for providing client-focused, high-quality advisory and educational services. Welcome to you, or kia ora, Sonia.
Thank you all. Looking forward to our discussion.
Fabulous. And finally, last but not least, is Danica Poklowski. She is an experienced and award-winning company secretary with experience in legal, health, and financial services. Danica is a chartered member of the Institute of Directors and sits on the board of Takapuna School and is the founder and director of Board Administration Services. Kia ora to you, Danica.
Kia ora, Sean, and tēnā koutou, everyone.
So everyone, just for the next 45 minutes, just relax, listen, add to the discussion by putting in your questions, which we hope you'll do. A full recording of this webinar along with the slide deck, the white paper, which has been prepared especially for this webinar, and a minute-taking template in Microsoft Word will be sent to you 24 hours after our session today. And we also have a special bonus for you right at the end, but more on that at the end of the session. So now I'm going to hand over to Jen, I believe, to kick off our webinar. Welcome again, Jen.
Thank you, Sean. Look, it's an absolute pleasure to be here and to be leading this panel with Nika and Sonia. I am going to run through these slides as quickly as possible in terms of the requirement side of it, because I think most of you on here are pretty much interested in the doing and creating those effective minutes and those tips and tricks on how to do that. The first slide, Sean, that we've got is, of course, minutes are designed to fulfill compliance requirements. And most countries have a set requirement for how long you have to keep your minutes for. Here in New Zealand, it's 7 years. Is it the same in Australia, Sonia?
You're on mute, Sonia.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, could be a little bit different in other countries. So our next slide, Sean. We've got, ensuring that your minutes are going to be kept for years. Now, integrity and thoroughness provides an excellent history for decisions. And are you going to remember how those decisions were made and what those decisions were, for example, 7 years after the fact? Probably not. And the due diligence of incoming directors, that's really important, and need to be able to see the deliberations and the considerations that are made. And I liken it to a bit like showing you your workings in math. The judge isn't just looking for the right decision. The judge is going to be looking at how you made it and whether the right process was taken to make your decisions. So, protecting organisation and director reputation. I think we could probably have a complete webinar on this topic alone. But remember, we all know that every set of minutes should include an interest register, and BoardPro does this exceptionally well. But the interest should actually be recorded at the beginning of every agenda item if there is a conflict. And these minutes can be used as evidence. And for that reason, sensitive matters like HR, etc., should be very carefully recorded. Sonia, do you have experience in that side?
Yeah, and I probably just wanted to add to that, Jen, in the context of going back and talking about reputation. Often that leads to us having conversations where we might say, let's be careful what we do minute, but we need to make sure that we put enough context in so that, as you say, when we're looking back on those minutes, they're actually demonstrating the board was addressing the key issues friendly. Also, just talking about that individual reputation piece, thinking about the fact that our duties are owed individually, we also want to make sure that those minutes record how we've personally managed our conflicts.
Absolutely. So responsibility and track implementation. Okay, so if you're not on BoardPro, hopefully you are on a governance tool that does have a really comprehensive and easy to use actions list. So I can only speak to the BoardPro experience in that this does it, BoardPro does it automatically. So you record your action in the minutes, and then BoardPro sends a reminder to the person that their action's due. It tracks the action and directly straight into the minutes. You don't have to put in a separate table or a separate Word document. And for us board secretaries, it's actually really invaluable and efficient use of our time, not having to chase people manually for actions and things like that. But I guess you would probably experience this too, Danica, in that it's often hard to feel like confident enough to interrupt the meeting, to get timeframes and things for your actions.
Yeah, I think it can be difficult, but I think it is very valuable as a board secretary or the person taking the minutes to get that clarity on what the actions are, to make sure that they have an objective and they're not open-ended, and to clarify who's responsible for the actions and when the action's due, so that you've actually got some ground to follow up on those actions with, and you know what you're putting into any board portal that you're using, or even if you're just using a little Excel spreadsheet and managing it yourself, having that clarity around the actions is very helpful.
Yeah, and I tell you what, there's nothing like raising that in front of the entire board for accountability too, right?
I think leading on from that is the fact that we draft minutes to provide actions to our executive and others, so to give effect to our decision making. And if we ourselves, when taking the minutes, can't quite work out and understand what the expectations of the board is, then it's really important we really get that clarified immediately, because we don't want people going off and actioning items, and then as we see in future meetings, they come back and say, oh, that's not what we thought we agreed. We don't want that.
Yeah, so here's a top tip for you in terms of taking action items. These action items should stand alone. So when they're read separate from the minutes, the person who was responsible for the action and any other director reading that action should be able to determine exactly what was being asked of the person responsible.
Jen, I know BoardPro does action reminders by workflow inside the system itself, but do you have any tips for people that don't use board portals in terms of capturing those actions and assigning them to individuals?
Oh, back in the day, before I used BoardPro, it really was a case of literally dropping calendar reminders for myself as a board secretary into my calendar to email and remind people that their action was due, and also to include it as a topic with the board chair coming up to the next meeting about what actions that they've experienced, talking to the CE as well, because sometimes people will report directly to the CE or the chair that their action's been complete, but it's chasing action items and making sure that the action list is correct on board day without an automated tool is a bit like herding cats and trying to find suitable meeting dates.
And it can take up a lot of bandwidth in the meeting to go over the actions, because when people haven't provided their updates, they're being asked by the board to provide updates in the meeting, and then discussions get generated from those actions. And it's just a lot easier to be able to follow up and capture what the outcome of those actions are or what the progress of them is in advance of the meeting.
Danica, there's one question from Paul O'Connor. He just asked, should tasks be assigned to management or to specific individuals? Is identifying work actions the work of the board or the CEO? So do either of you have a view on that in your...
I think ultimately actions that come from a board meeting, what the board is asking of management, if they say generically management, I would go to the CEO and ask who they want to assign the responsibility of that to. It's definitely helpful to have specific people or roles. You could say this is for the CIO or the CMO, as opposed to naming people in the minutes or the actions. But yeah, I think if you're unsure and you can't speak up in the meeting, send an email to the chair after the meeting and just get them to agree on what you've written down as the actions, so that they've got it clear in their head what they're asking before you go and distribute it to management or whoever it is that needs those actions.
Yeah, I'm really clear on this. It's the CEO. The CEO is responsible for every staff member in the organisation. And if the board has given a management action, that management action is on the CEO. And then it's the CEO's job to farm that out and to work out who needs to complete that action. And it's the CEO's job to report back to the board.
And doesn't that highlight for us that there's no one size fits all? So this is the
Absolutely.
important role of the company secretariat as that high governance officer to work with the CE and the chair to actually say, how should this work in practice for us? Yeah.
Absolutely.
We have a question that's come in from Rebecca. Rebecca says, I'd love to be able to export meeting minutes as a Word document, have more than one owner of action items, tabulate action items, and export action items as a separate standalone document. Jen, any idea how we would do that for Rebecca?
Yeah, no. So the reason why Board Pro is really, or your board portal, any governance tool, is that it actually provides a secure platform. The moment that you're downloading the minutes in Word, that allows those minutes to be manipulated. And that's not what we want. We want to keep at a high governance level. We want to use technology to the best of our ability and keep those documents really tight and secure. And if you've got a board chair that's asking you to do that in Word, maybe you need to have a conversation with them about technology, the uses of technology and the security to the organisation. Sorry, Sean, what was the other part of that? The actions?
Oh, I've just deleted it, sorry. I have another one that's just...
Being able to assign, I 100% agree with you, being able to assign actions to multiple people, for example, if it's an entire board action, would be really useful. And I can tell you, I know from this perspective that it is on a work plan to come through for Board Pro, but I don't know about other board software. I use several different board softwares other than Board Pro. Board Pro is my main one, but they also don't have the ability to assign actions to multiple people. In fact, yeah. So I'm just going to move forward. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time.
Great. Go for
Sorry,
it,
team. So in terms of recording minutes with decisions, these can help with strategy and planning, and which is Sonia's area of expertise. So from my strategy and planning sessions that I do with my board and those questions of bringing them back to strategy, did we apply the values to the decisions that we made in the last year? Did we make decisions that promoted the strategy that we agreed to? Are topics that we discussed at our meetings helping us to progress the strategy? And is anything missing? Is what I ask about whether minutes are recording what we need to correctly when looking back over history. Sonia?
Yeah, I think that's similar, very similar, Jen, in the context of historically, what is it that we were seeking to capture, which a new individual without that line of sight to that decision-making process would seek to understand. And more importantly, if it is the subject of an issue, that decision into the future, that we as officers are responsible for, is there enough context to give us a colour as to the conversation, because you're not likely to remember all that detail yourself. Yeah.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Okay, so due diligence, induction and audit. All directors should do due diligence before they come on a board, and part of that due diligence is reviewing the minutes. And when you're trying to entice a director to a board, and let's face it, it is getting harder and harder to find really good quality directors that want to come on board and put that responsibility into a business. They want to make sure that the business that they're coming into is solid and professional. So you've got to think to yourself, when you're creating your minutes, are they going to fully reflect your own company's culture? Are they going to reflect the proper due process that you do for decision making? They're going to show that informed decision making. And I think that this is another lens that the minutes should be viewed through. Danica, Sonia, I'll open that up to you.
Yeah, I think the other space where this would be really important is if you're looking to introduce any funds into the business, then any potential investors or purchasers of the company are going to absolutely go to your board minutes to look at the history of the company. The minutes tell the story of the company, and that is the one source of truth that auditors, investors, courts look to. So minutes are really important in this perspective.
Just leading on from Danica, I just want to make the point that we're currently seeing also directors very interested in understanding organisational culture before they come onto a board. And I think you made the point, Jen, that if our decision-making process is not reflected in the minutes as to the context in which a board thinks about its decisions, how does it align to our values? What's the purpose? It's really hard for a new director to get that lens. Now, the minutes is not the only way, but it should provide some colour and context around organisational culture and how that's embedded.
Absolutely. Culture comes from the top down. We know this. So, we should be living it and breathing it in our minutes and in our board meetings too. Thanks, John. We can go forward from there.
Forward from there?
Yeah.
Now we're getting into the gritty stuff.
Now we're getting into the stuff that people want to know about. Okay, so our next slide. So taking the minutes, this is the information that you really want to know about. So I'm going to explain to you, like the text is there, you can read that, but I'd really like to explain the difference between a minute taker and a board secretary. So if I've got CEOs on here or I've got board chairs on here, if you're still treating your board secretary like they should be coming in, staying silent, being sat in the corner, and then asked to bring in the tea at 10 o'clock, you're really missing out on the value of a minute taker and board secretary. The difference between a minute taker and a board secretary is that the minute taker will do just that. They will do the minutes, they will create a fantastic set of minutes, and that can be reviewed. But they don't do things like ensure that you have an annual work plan, make sure that you're compliant with the Companies Act and any other legislation that you need to be, make sure that directors are really protected or that those quality discussions happen, be able to support the chair in setting the agenda and following up with strategy and planning. It's a massive big difference. And I think that the biggest difference between having a minute taker, which is usually someone who's within the organisation, or perhaps somebody who's on the board, and a professional board secretary, is that you get the experience of somebody who does this for a living. It is their life blood, and they live and breathe it.
I'm passionate about this one, so I'm going to beat Danica to respond to this. But for me, this, I think, highlights a really effective board will have a supporting compliance officer who is also carrying out a very strategic role through that company secretariat resource. I think this has been really undervalued in terms of the contribution that this individual can offer to a boardroom. And so I think we're starting to see the value coming into this role, and the understanding around the board and executive relationship is really joined together by that company secretariat. So I'm a big advocate, not a fan of directors taking minutes. I think it takes you away from contribution. Also not a fan of just that minute taker, like you say, who's very much just seeking to record but can't influence. The company secretariat is often not well liked, and they have to be very thick-skinned, and that's because they have to hold executive to account on behalf of the board.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the end of the day, it's another independent person on the board that has no skin in the game. And so assisting chair to call people out is pretty important. And I think you've raised a really important topic, Sonia, and that's who shouldn't be taking the minutes. So the CEO or board members should not be taking the minutes. And the reason for that is, firstly, when you're taking minutes, it's a really important and key job. You can't be in two places at once. You can't fully participate in a board meeting while you're trying to take the minutes. And that's, I see you nodding, Danica. It's probably one of the largest things that our clients say to us is, oh, thank goodness, because I wasn't able to participate in the board meetings beforehand when we take over from them. And secondly, if the CE is taking the minutes, then the CE is putting the CE's lens on the board's minutes. And let's just make sure that we understand that the board is separate from the organisation. The board deals with governance and not with management. And if management are being able to put their lens on the board's set of minutes beforehand, it's not a good look.
Jen, I have a question for you here that's come in. It's in relation to Board Pro. In Board Pro, assigning the action, I find I can only assign to someone who was on Board Pro.
Correct.
Who would you suggest if it was to be a manager, it assigned to the CEO as the owner?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, if the action's for the marketing manager or the CTO, then that action gets assigned to the CEO. And within the action, you can actually put the marketing manager too, but the CEO is responsible for that action. Danica, how would you do that?
I was going to say, you can actually add the Chief Marketing Officer, for example, into Board Pro as a user and restrict their access to just have an executive lens. They can't see the rest of the board papers, but you can assign actions to them. So it's just another way to do it.
Thanks, Danica.
Okay, this is what I'm passionate about, is these lenses. And it's actually one of my top tips, which I'm going to share with you at the end of the webinar, is that the reason why you have a professional board secretary is that they are able to look at the minutes through different lenses. And there are so many different lenses. You can see there that we've actually got them written down. So please take them in as we're talking about them. And if you've got questions about this, please just throw them at us, because it's our job as board secretaries to protect directors and make sure that their interests are protected and the company's interests are protected. It's our job to make sure that the tone and culture of the business is reflected and all of those things. But mainly, the question that I'm sure is on the tip of your tongue is, how much do I record and how little do I record? And how do I record that? What's really important? So the answer to that question is, I record absolutely. Yeah, there we go, Sean. How long should the minutes be? That's a really good segue. I record a whole lot. I do. And then I come back and I refine my minutes down. And I often will keep a copy and share that copy with the chair of the raw minutes and say, look, if I've left anything out, please let me know and I'll add it back in. But the lenses are really important to make that decision about what goes in. If it's for information item, does the board need to know about this in 7 years' time? Probably not. So a simple one paragraph, one line, the board received this information. The key takeaway from this is, full stop, let it go. If it's in relation to a robust discussion that the board had before they made a decision, include all of that in there. That's important to keep for that culture, to show that there's a robust decision-making process.
You must have a view on that.
Yeah, I take a slightly different approach. I think when there's been a robust discussion, you absolutely document that there has been a robust discussion by the board around X, Y, and Z. I don't think it's the best thing to include all of the conversation that was had, but I think Jen was saying we summarize it, which is important. But I think it's very easy to include lots of information into minutes, and it's very hard to summarize and include not much, but just the right amount of information into minutes.
Absolutely. It's a massive skill, isn't it, Danica?
It is. And 2 minutes that are 27 pages long.
I think this constantly changes too. I think as you get new directors on, they start to question whether or not there's the right content. So this is something that's not a set and forget either, is it?
No.
It's something that changes with every chair, has a different style.
Correct.
So the questions that people are asking around how much, you'll find some chairs will want more than others, but as directors, we're certainly not wanting SB said this, JB said that, DP said that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Names that I refrain from using names unless it's absolutely necessary or there's no way around it.
Yeah.
But roles and titles, my usual go-to if I need to. But you got to remember, the board is one natural person. The board should be coming together and acting consecutively. So if one person has a suggestion, the board has a suggestion.
Jen, we have a number of questions here. We've probably got time for all of them, I'd say. So
let's go.
Okay, I'll read out a few. So this is from Tony Banks. My other burning question, which may come up later once the minutes are confirmed within Board Pro, I also upload a signed copy. What are the rules around keeping the original copy, and do we even need to keep it once it's scanned into Board Pro?
Look, this is a really hot topic, Tony, so thanks for bringing it up. I've just been having this conversation with a number of my boards because signing the minutes is as old-fashioned as putting the motion forward, seconding it, and all those sorts of things. So I'm trying to move into a more modern frame when the minutes are confirmed, that, you know, that it's by consensus, and the minutes can't be confirmed without the chair confirming. And so therefore, does the chair really need to print those out and sign them? Does that not defeat the purpose of a secure governance product and tool? Or, you know, do you have to export them into a signing tool? I don't know. Danica, Sonia, what are your thoughts on that?
I think so long as you're documenting that the board have resolved to approve the minutes as they're presented in the board pack, that is the formal record, that what is included in the board pack is what is official record once it's approved. I don't think you need to go through the next step of signing it. It's down to personal preference. Some companies, that's what they want to do. That's the legacy. It's keeping with the thing. That's fine. It's down to opinions of who wants to do what. There's no right or wrong way, but you don't need to, is my answer to that.
Sonia, you look like you want to jump in there.
I've got something to say. Absolutely. I think it's convention, like you say, Danica. I think to add to that, in the Australian jurisdiction, we've got very specific requirements which allow us to embed that unsigned version to adopt the minutes, but we do need a signed version to be put into the register. So that's actually something that the governance bodies over here sort of advice on from a barrister, because there was so much ambiguity. And to your point, Jen, enterprises want to move rapidly now and not sit and have a conversation at their next board meeting around minutes. So we've very much actioned it as an electronic process, but there still has to be a signed copy. Now that's often then scanned into, but not a hard copy kept anymore. So
yeah, I think Board Pro is actually looking into, because obviously Board Pro operates right around the world, and there are different regulations and requirements in every different country, and so you'll find that there are going to be some legislative requirements for signing minutes, even though it's an archaic practice, and here in New Zealand we're a little bit more forward. But anyway, it could be coming out quite quickly with Board Pro and attaching signatures to directors and chairs and being able to apply those electronically within the product at some stage on the roadmap. Next question, Sean.
Couple of other items here. This one from Lee Svedson. Should minutes reflect the order of the actual meeting or order of the agenda?
Order of the actual meeting. And it's a pain when things get taken out of order, but they really should reflect how things actually occurred in the meeting. Danica, what do you think?
I think, yes, they should reflect the order of the meeting, but should be tied back to the agenda item, which if the agenda's numbered, you'd say this is agenda number, and the numbers they don't need to be in order. I think it needs to follow the order of the meeting, but being linked to the agenda makes it a lot easier to follow as an outsider reading the records.
Absolutely.
Another question from Christina. I know it's hard to estimate an average, but how long do you think it should take a good minute taker to finish the draft minutes for a 4-hour meeting? Who would like to handle that one?
I put that straight in my proposal. So when someone wants to hire me as a board secretary, I tell them how much time it takes. So for a 4-hour meeting, it's no secret, I'm happy to divulge that. I allow 2 hours before the meeting to prep, which is pull the meeting together, because remember, this is a full board secretary, not just a minute taker role. So that's to coordinate and put the board pack together, get the agenda, send that out, check in on actions, make sure that those are all completed, include in the agenda in your work plan items, etc. And then once the 4-hour meeting's taken, I allow 2 hours to pull together the minutes, and I have a time frame between 24 and 48 hours for the chair of the board to receive a draft set of minutes.
Great.
Danica, how about you?
I think it can take a little bit longer in the start while you're learning the business. So I like to allow the same amount of time as the meeting takes to get all the minutes done and to clarify anything and follow up action. So I'd say for a 4-hour meeting, I'd allow 4 hours. But it gets quicker as you start to learn the business. You learn a lot more about the language, and it definitely, you can probably half that, like Jen says.
Okay, we're going to run out of time with all of these great questions. We've just got a whole bunch of them that have come in. We'll do our best to get through them at the end. Just finish off with one more though, Jen. This is from Marie-Lise. What are your thoughts about recording of minutes with notice of course?
Hell no. So the reason I say that is your minutes are all discoverable, and there's so much as a board secretary, I can tell you, and Danica will probably agree with me here, there's so much conversation that happens in the boardroom that should not be recorded and should absolutely not. At a pinch, I've done this with clients if I've not been available, and that's generally because I set my meeting schedule in July, August, and for those clients that haven't quite managed to get there till January, February to set their board meeting schedule for the full year, and they need to change some meeting dates, for example, and I may not be available, I will say, look, record your meeting, I'll take the minutes, but just no.
Okay.
Yeah.
One from Robert Collins. Should a preliminary strategy summary of actions be issued to preclude full text of issued minutes?
If you're issuing your minutes between 24 and 48 hours to your board, those actions go with those set of minutes. So I think unnecessary. Sonia, Danica?
Yeah, I was going to say, if the minutes take longer than that, then yes, you should send them out. I think actions need to go out within 24 to 48 hours. I know in some businesses, it's not practical to turn minutes around in 24 to 48 hours. They might go out a week later. And in that case, it's easier for everyone that's attended the meeting to just have that clarified view of what the actions were. So it's really clear on who's responsible.
Let's move on. And if we have time for these at the end, we'll come back to them, I think, team. Preparing and finalising the minutes.
Okay, so here we go. Yeah, I did touch a little bit on this, but why the CEO shouldn't be reviewing the minutes before the chair. And again, it's to make sure that the board's minutes stay the board's minutes and the board's decisions and the board's direction, rather than have an operational lens put over them before they're finalised. I know that a lot of chairs do tend to want their CEs to review the minutes. I discourage that practice. If that's what the chair wants, and that's what the chair gets, but it's not a good, robust governance process, and I actively discourage it. And again, I try to get the minutes out within 24 to 48 hours to the chair. Now, it's the chair's responsibility to review and send those back to me. If I haven't had a response from the chair, I often discuss this as part of my board secretary role, that if the chair's unable to review the draft minutes within 5 days of the meeting, then they go out as draft minutes, and I make it very clear that the chair hasn't had an opportunity to review the draft minutes, because it's important that board members have the opportunity to view those minutes within 5 days of the meeting.
We have one from, let me just have a look here. Lars Schriphorst. I've been in the position where auditors have required the signed version, even in the electronic copy form. Do you want to comment on that?
It'd be interesting to know which jurisdiction that is, Lars, but also to what end? What was the auditor requiring? Was there a concern around the audit process, or is it that? Yeah, so I think that one, Sean, could be for a number of reasons, as I'd see it.
Okay. Rebecca asks, who needs the signed copy? You said a register.
It's for your company records.
Yeah, your minute register. So you've still got to keep it minute register.
Absolutely. So if you're not on Board Pro or a governance portal, then you may actually need to create a Word document that records every decision. And there's some hot tips around doing that. So make sure that every one of your minutes is numbered. And I suggest a naming convention for that. The naming convention that I use, and happy to share that, is I use the year. So 23 today would be 23/03/09. And that way, if all your minutes will sit nicely and consecutively in a document folder, and then after that you've got the agenda item, or from the agenda, and then you've got the point in which it was raised. So if it's decision 1, it's agenda item 10, so 10/ or 10.1, 10.2, 10.3 for your decision, and then you need to write the decision out in full in the register in Word.
We have another one here. Do you write minutes in a third person perspective, or do you use we, our, etc.? Also, do you mainly write in paragraphs or bullet points?
Oh, I'm cringing. Definitely not we, our, us. That's one of my top tips. Don't use that. Don't use we, our, us, them. They is one natural person. So the board is, not the board was, or the board were excited to hear about the management report. No, the board is excited. So that's the way that you want to approach that. Danica?
Yeah, I, we, our. You refer to as the company, as if someone's talking about we did this, the company did this. If the board did this, the board did this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it's just that making sure that they are it's professional, that you're keeping it to that professional corporate level. And whether you're a not-for-profit, a tiny small business, a really large, big corporate business, your minutes should be as professional. There's no need to have unprofessional minutes just because you're not for profit or a sports club or a charity. There's some small tips. And so I was just going to say, I thought about this beforehand, and I've put a couple of top tips, and I'm going to ask Danica and Sonia to incorporate theirs if they can think on the fly. So firstly, Grammarly. If you haven't got Grammarly, you should get Grammarly's bloody awesome. It will help you with your grammar. It'll help you show when, you've got spelling mistakes in them. And again, don't use people's names. Don't say Jen said or Paul said, because it's just not professional. The CEO mentioned, the CEO suggested, the chair mentioned, the CTO mentioned. And depending on your chair, it may be Mr. Smith, Ms. Smith, or my preference is when somebody makes a call, instead of saying Ms. Smith suggested that, I put the board suggested that. Because it's not important often who makes that call, because the board's acting as one natural person. And the minutes, reading those minutes helps the board members feel like they are one big whānau, one big family of decision makers. The second hot tip that I'm going to give you is make sure that the expectations from the chair are met. And Sonia, you mentioned this earlier. You've got to have those good conversations with the chair to know what it is that they expect of you. And that may change when chairs change with what they expect to see in the minutes, what they prefer to see in the minutes. How I like to approach this is I actually like to say my style of taking minutes is, are you happy with that? Because I'm the expert. It's my job. And hopefully you get an idea whether your chair just trusts your judgment on how to do that. But you do need to check in regularly to make sure that the chair is still happy. And you can use all kind of leading words. Are you happy with the length of the minutes? Do you think I'm including too much? Would you like a little bit more fleshed out in the decision-making process? So you can actually, my next tip is that interject, be heard. If you're not sure about something, there are a few really neat ways to get there to make sure you've got the right minutes. So the first one is you can say, so in summary, or you can say, from a governance perspective, if they're getting too deep into the weeds and into management. So from a governance perspective, how do we deal with that? Or you can say, now for the minutes, what would you like recorded? And that helps you get the information that you need in a nice, succinct way, because then it puts the onus back on the board, back on the chair to give you what they expect for those minutes. And the last tip is you really need to read through your minutes with those lenses. Is it protecting the company and the directors? Is it providing a really good history? Can a new person read those minutes stand alone and understand where the board's coming from and what the strategy and vision of the board is? And does your minute contribute to the decision-making process? Does it contribute, or is it really unnecessary?
Danica, Sonia, any last words from you?
I'm going to come in there and just add and potentially also respond to one of the questions in the chat box, which is there's a CEO who is preempting what the minutes ought to say, and before the chair has an opportunity to review minutes within 24 hours, they're sending out their summary of the outcomes through to the executive team the morning after a meeting. So the CEO is taking it upon themselves to actually action what they think they might have heard from that meeting. I think it takes us back. I know Jen's going, no, Danica's seeing this as well. We've all seen this in practice. I think this takes us back to that important role of the company secretariat resource. So this is a function that connects the board effectiveness and the board's expectations for performance through the chair to the CEO. And so if the CEO is taking those steps before the chair's had an opportunity in their leadership role to approve the minutes, I think there's an overreach by the CEO, and I think the company secretariat needs to be speaking to the chair to advise that this conduct is occurring. So hopefully that also responds to our anonymous attendee question, which was a great one.
Wonderful.
Just to clarify, that's not the minutes. So if the CEO is doing that and sending out a summary to his team of what happened in the meeting, that's how he's seen the meeting, that's his version of it. It is not the official record. It is not the minutes of what the meeting was. The minutes of the meeting have to be approved and agreed by the board.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, team. So Please feel free to connect with the presenters today on LinkedIn. I'm sure they will look forward to your connection. If you would like to be put in touch with Jen, Sonia, or Danica, please indicate your interest at the survey at the end of the webinar. We have a webinar coming up on the March 16th, which is very popular. It's an Ask Me session. So it's everything about governance. It's your opportunity to come into the webinar and ask us, or ask the expert panel, of which there will be 4 people, anything about governance. So I strongly recommend you take advantage of that webinar. You'll receive an email from us really shortly, which will include a video of today's webinar and the presentation slides, the topic white paper, and of course the minutes template. And as I mentioned before, we have a special offer for you. Now, just as you leave the webinar, don't forget to complete our 1-minute survey and you'll go into the draw for our beautiful hamper worth $400. We'll announce the winner shortly after the webinar today. So thanks everybody for your attendance. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thanks to Jen, Sonia, and Danica for the great conversation today. Really appreciated it. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on March 16th, which of course is Everything Governance Q&A. That'll be led by Simon Telfer, Lisa Cook, Stephen Bowman, and Danica Poklowski. Thanks everybody for your attention today. Have a great day.